Good evening. Welcome back to People Purpose Place for our regular Monday evening catch-up, all matters housing. G'day, Christine, and g'day, Darren. How you doing?
Good, g'day. Good to see you again.
Likewise. Always good to set aside some time for a big fat conversation. And that happened exactly the same time last week.
It wouldn't be Monday without a slight bit of technical malfunction.
You know what I reckon it is?
Mate,
Kristen's not telling us, but she's got a loose connection in the back of the box there somewhere. And every time she
either
moves
that
a
or
chair,
maybe there's some people out there who are trying to pull the plug on our conversation.
that's it.
Which is probably a good segue into tonight's conversation, which is obviously about looking at the headlines and having some discussion around those headlines, and hopefully, if we can get some coherent conversation going, maybe we can actually get those people on in the future and try and expand on the conversation, because I think just before we came on board, you might have mentioned something very important, is that, you know, there's almost this one really, really super important part of all of the commentary occurring at the moment that appears to be missing.
Yeah, those pesky people. What do they want to know about it all?
Correct.
Yes, and it's a source of frustration having, in doing previous research, one of the oldest media statements I could find was dated before my birth, 1967, railing against the housing affordability challenge. So since then, it's only naturally got worse, and I can't blame it all on my doing, but it has been progressively and escalating year on year, decade on decade. So I don't think it's a very recent adventure or a very recent occurrence that we've got here. It seems to be just a natural progression of the mechanism we use.
Yeah, 100%. And I think we only did just recently, we were having some conversations, doing some, collating some data to have presentations for some of the Rotary clubs. We compared the conversation around, 2018 even, and, those close dates with what we already knew was a housing crisis then. And houses were unaffordable, and we had the largest houses in the domestic world in 2011. And all of those things that were known about. And now we have this, in brackets, inverted commas, with a couple of exclamation marks, we now got a crisis.
That's right.
It's like it snuck up on us. Yeah, that's right. It was a 30-year sneak up. Like, as far as, cats chasing rats, that's the most cunning and
playing
patient.
the long game.
Playing the long game, going to get that guy in the end. So yeah, and I think that might be a little bit of tonight's conversation. But there is some interesting perspective. I noticed you've had some conversation, or at least seen some commentary you thought that was poignant, and I've certainly seen on LinkedIn some comment, which is, I suppose, maybe North Queensland or regional centric, maybe. Adjunct Professor Colin Dwyer has been making more and more conversation around, what the impact on the regions are currently, and some of the big ticket things that government is now looking at, to some extent clutching at straws. So we might have a bit of a talk about some of those initiatives that are out there, and whether they pass a bit of the rigor test. So where might be the challenges of some of these things, and this instant response government action, is it really going to deliver what they hope it is?
I'm going to be so bold as to say we have a lot of evidence over a long period of time now, like this process of government. We've had, we had this in the World War II event, and the greatest minds of our government then drew a line on the map called the Brisbane line and said, we'll concede everything above that line. let them have it, and we'll just have the women and children south of Brisbane. So
Yeah.
they can absolutely make large-scale decisions that totally feed whole swathes of our community to the wolves. And it would appear that regional Australia is very much in that boat today.
Mm.
And when I
Yeah.
mean regional, think Newcastle, Sunshine
Yeah.
Coast, Ipswich. Like, if you're not
Yeah.
big enough to have the horsepower to get front and centre of the political agenda, you don't have to be a small Boulia or a tiny little outback town. You know, regional,
Absolutely.
quite large centres.
And it
Have we
does
worked out what's
appear
happening,
like.
Christine?
No, we're just waiting for that. Normally by now we've gone through the loops, and then Colby said we had a unique code this time, so it should be easy for Christine to find that. Let's hope.
Fingers crossed.
Yes,
Fingers crossed.
absolutely.
So
We
before
can probably start with the check-in question, I suppose. Can we? You reckon?
Yeah, it makes sense to me. And since you wrote it, maybe you could read it out to us, and we can respond accordingly.
Yeah, and some of these steps are about modelling some of the ideas and concepts that we have as a part of our whole system. So obviously the check-in questions primarily around all of us being in the moment and being present with each other as a group and with the audience. So the check-in question today is, at the moment there is a lot of conversation in the media about, in brackets, the housing crisis. What do we think, or what do you think that the average person on the street thinks about this?
I think the housing crisis by the man in the street is absolutely a real impact. And it's probably in all of these human outcomes, like sense of angst. Australia has the highest rate of depression in the world. And if you don't have stable, secure roof over your head, or you are fearful of that being taken away from you at the end of your current lease, or whatever your timeline is, that'll make you anxious. So the man on the street, I think, has a fair sense that housing's not what it could be. I was listening to someone argue about the numbers, saying that Australia has an incredibly wealthy country, numbers of income, GDP per capita kind of argument. And numbers only say so much. I think the real lived experience, lots of people are saying that it has never been tougher. So the average income may be higher, but fuel prices are higher, grocery prices are higher, power prices are higher. The roof over my head is harder to actually find and maintain. So my real lived experience is it's harder work.
Yeah. So it just, Christine, now that you've got through the mandatory technical challenges at the start of the episode, we just...
Thank heavens we have Colby, is all I can say. I was so mystified. He fixed it up.
Absolutely. So the check-in question we're answering is, at the moment there is a lot of conversation in the media about the housing crisis, in brackets. What do you think the average person on the street thinks?
Did you get through your answer, Rowan?
Yeah, I'm well done.
So I'm up?
Yes, please.
Yes.
I would have, because I've been ill for some time, I have little idea what the average person I probably never had much idea what the average person on the street thinks. But because we're all so wrapped up in our own worlds,
Yes.
And we love to hang out with people who have attitudes like ours. But my guess is that the experience of people are actually, the people that I know who are experiencing hardship are really confused, befuddled, angry, upset. unbelieving, in fact, that they could have landed in the situation where, Australia, listen to my accent, Australia is so good at looking after people. I love this about Australia. Look at Americans, they're so mean. Sorry, we are. And Australians are generous and kind. And all of a sudden, people who've been living in this generous, kind society that really does strive for some kind, I know we don't come up to the standard by any means, or certainly we aren't, we're not magical. But this is a great country, and people have always had a feeling this is the lucky country. I can move anywhere I want. I can move into any house I want. I can live where I want to live. I can find a job somewhere. They're just feeling like, what happened? WTF? What is going on? This is just, they feel betrayed. They feel upset. Now, I'm not in that situation because I have a house, but I feel indignant, on behalf of everybody else who's upset, angry, confused, feeling displaced, feeling betrayed. I get it. I don't have the experience, but I feel like I can empathize pretty strongly.
Yeah.
How about yourself, Darren? What are your thoughts on the man in the street?
Yeah. Yeah, obviously we should be politically correct there, the person on the street. But
yeah, exactly. We should be.
But I would say that it's a bit like, and I think this is a little bit of the blasé nature of an Australian in general, is until it actually affects you, generally quite often you're a little bit ambivalent to the whole situation, right? Yeah, she'll be right, So, and I think, some of that washes off in how we look at issues. And, we stand here flabbergasted by, and we're going to get into some of it over the next half an hour or so in regards to all the comments that are flying around. But I think the average person on the street is probably only as engaged in this conversation as the pain that it provides their life. A little bit as Christine said, if you have a situation where you're in a house and you're doing okay and you might be a bit stretched, you might just be a little bit aware of the fact that, hey, the interest rates are going up and my repayments are going up, or, hey, if I've got to change rental properties, this is going to be a bit hard. But if you're deep in the middle of this, I mean, we had an office there at one stage in the centre of Townsville, and it was highly noticeable the amount of homeless people that was increasing on a weekly basis.
In Townsville, at least they didn't have to sleep in the snow. But
correct.
I mean,
totally.
It's crazy hot in Townsville a lot of the time. Correct. And it crazy rains a lot of the time, and that's not much help. And I mean, if Kansas rental properties have something like a 0.1, I think, percent vacancy rate, Townsville won't be far behind or far ahead.
No, absolutely. So I think there's a lot of people who it's like a fog in the background because it's not directly impacting on them. But there's another vast group of people that we know, I hear my children start to talk about, hey, their friends are considering going out renting, and they go, what the heck now? Like, this thing's $450 a week for a 3-bedroom thing. And the good thing is it's rubbish. So I think a lot of this, the hard part is the big ticket lines that are thrown out in the media aren't really understood unless it impacts on you. And then the one thing that seems to be, as we were alluding to before while you were dealing with the technical difficulties, was all of these are economic discussions that are occurring. No one's talking about the actual human who's going through that experience. We're talking about economics, and we're talking about volumes and supply and demand and interest rates, serviceability.
To a degree, I understand why we want to stay there, because 1 + 1 is 2. Maths is pretty simple, and so we can talk to, if the percentages aren't cutting it, we'll switch to gross dollars amount, and if gross dollars aren't working, we'll switch back to percentages, and we just can talk comfortably in that language, but it has lost complete sight of the human impact that we're having. The fact that more than half of our country has angst about their roof over their head, their basic needs of shelter, and maybe it's a medium term at the end of this lease. But at the end of this lease, it might go up $100 and I may not be able to afford it. I may not be able to stay in my suburb. Even if I have to relocate suburb, that's an enormous stress. So that's affecting such a large portion of our community. And it's such a burden that we're carrying. Instead of being the best version of ourselves on a daily basis, footloose and fancy free, creating the best version of Australia. We've now got this dead weight that we're carrying, which is absolutely slowing us down.
And I think that probably even crosses back over into a little bit of the conversation we're having last week about safety, where I asked the question, were we safer in prehistory than we are now? And there's no doubt you're right. If the emotional and mental load of being in a modern life and dealing with the reality that you might be out on the street or you might be under massive financial stress in a short period of time is and would be weighing on a lot of people. So I think there needs to be a human discussion about that a lot more rather than just, as you said, statistics. And now we've got a bigger number to contribute to the number.
Yeah, so we had a 1 million number. We then trumped it with a 2 million number, 2 billion. It's meaningless.
Yes. Yeah.
So very briefly, speaking to that to highlight for our politicians and thought provokers who want to say, surely a $2 billion number is better than a $1 billion number. Mm-hmm. Here is an exact example why it isn't anywhere near as good as you think it is. In the last 2 years, a practitioner that we work with was quoting and winning and delivering work at a $1,250 a square metre number. He's now using $1,850 a square metre number. So we've doubled our budget, and what's happened to the cost of our housing? Just in that one example, that's almost exactly eaten up all the doubling of your $2 billion budget.
Yeah.
And fundamentally, and the bigger glaring problem is nobody is thinking about how does the house, the end result, address the human need. We're just talking about widgets. We'll build more of them, 1 million of them. Well, the last 1 million houses we built really missed the mark by a fair way. Why would we build another 1 million of those?
Because they look like the last 1 million. That's why.
Oh.
That's a great reason, isn't it?
Well, as long as our Instagram feed is happy with that.
Well, I don't think we think about whether we're happy with the aesthetics or not. I think we just accept it, that the aesthetics seem to be accepted as long as the price is right. And boy, the price is not right for a lot of people right now.
And as you said, I mean, I think also it can be fairly easily tracked. And if you say, well, look at cause and effect, how do we go from a situation where we had houses in Townsville, say, being sold regularly at $1,250 a square metre, now at $1,850 a square metre. How did that occur? So the simplest answer to that is supply and demand. So ultimately, there was massive demand created by an artificial stimulus, which was the grant process. The grant process was primarily put in place because the government was very keen to ensure that during the COVID epidemic, that construction continued to soldier on. So instead